The dark secrets of the Roman gods that few know. 1. Nature of the gods. The nature of the Roman gods is fascinating and, at the same time, complex. Contrary to the vision of perfect and immutable deities, the Romans conceived of their gods with distinctly human characteristics. Imagine for a moment that these divine entities were endowed with virtues, such as wisdom and courage, but also with vices, such as excessive ambition and revenge. This duality reveals the depth of the human condition, reflecting the struggles that we all face throughout life. The gods, such as Jupiter, Mars, and Venus, were not just symbols of forces of nature or abstract ideals. They were personifications of emotions and behaviors that we all know. In many myths, we see Jupiter, the king of the gods, in situations where his decisions are influenced by jealousy and passions. It is interesting to think that, even though he was a supreme deity, he was not immune to the internal conflicts that afflict any human being. When I delve deeper into this topic, I realize that this anthropomorphic representation of the Roman gods invites us to reflect on our own lives. After all, who among us has never felt torn between right and wrong? This internal struggle is a fundamental aspect of the human experience. By worshipping gods that reflected their weaknesses and strengths, the Romans were perhaps seeking a way to understand and accept their own human nature. In short, the nature of the Roman gods is an invitation to self-exploration and acceptance. They remind us that divinity can be present in our failures and victories, and that by recognizing this complexity, we can connect more deeply with the essence of life. This connection, in turn, allows us to follow a path of self-knowledge and evolution. 2. Cults and rituals. The cults and rituals associated with the Roman gods were much more than simple public ceremonies. They were profound manifestations of devotion, mystery, and often secrecy. These rituals were performed in sacred places, often in isolated temples or shrines that were only accessible to a select group of priests and initiates. What fascinates me about this aspect is how these spaces were considered portals to the divine, where the line between the human and the supernatural became blurred. In many cases, the rituals involved sacrifices, which could be of animals or, on rare occasions, humans. Sacrificing an animal, such as a bull or a sheep, was seen as a way to please the gods and ensure their protection and blessings. It was believed that the essence of the animal would be offered to the god, while the meat would be shared among the participants in the ritual, symbolizing the communion between mortals and the divine. I often wonder how these acts were perceived by those who participated. It was a mixture of fear and reverence, of certainty and doubt. Interestingly, many of these rituals were performed in secret, away from the eyes of the general population. The exclusivity granted to these cults created an air of mystery and attracted those seeking deeper knowledge or a more intimate connection with their deities. The mysteries of cults, such as Ceres or Dionysus, which were known for their secret practices, promised revelations that could transform the lives of the initiated. It is as if, by entering into these rituals, people sought not only the approval of the gods, but also a deeper understanding of the universe and their place in it. In short, Roman cults and rituals were a profound reflection of the relationship between humans and the divine. They were, at the same time, expressions of faith, tools of social cohesion, and instruments of power. These elements, full of mystery and meaning, still teach us a lot about the human condition and our incessant searches for connection, understanding, and transcendence. 3. Gods and morality. When we talk about the morality of the Roman gods, it is important to understand that these deities were not exactly models of virtue. Contrary to what many might imagine, the gods did not follow a clear moral code, and their actions often challenged society's ethical values. This may seem surprising, but as I delve deeper into the subject, I realize that this moral ambiguity reflects the complexity of the human condition. The Romans worshipped gods who expressed both admirable virtues and deplorable vices. For example, Jupiter, the king of the gods, was associated with justice and order, but he also had a history of betrayal and infidelity. His relationships, especially with Juno, his wife, were often tumultuous and filled with jealousy. This leads us to reflect on human nature itself. Are we not all a little bit Jupiter in our lives? We have moments of greatness, but also weaknesses that make us vulnerable. Furthermore, Mars, the god of war, symbolized not only bravery, but also brutality and destruction. He was revered by soldiers, but his actions often resulted in suffering and death. This duality shows us that war, violence, and conflict are an inevitable part of the human experience. Just as the Romans saw the dark side of Mars, so too must we acknowledge the shadows that exist in our own lives. Ultimately, by understanding the ambiguous morality of the Roman gods, we can find a mirror for our own struggles. They show us that the pursuit of virtue is a journey fraught with challenges and contradictions. By connecting with these narratives, we are encouraged to embrace our own humanity, with all its nuances and complexities. After all, it is in accepting our flaws that we find true wisdom. 4. Influence on society. The influence of the Roman gods on society was profound and multifaceted. These divine beings were not just distant mythological figures, they were an integral part of the everyday lives of Roman citizens. From the simplest moments of everyday life to the most complex political decisions, the presence of the gods was constant and undeniable. First, it is interesting to note how religion was intertwined with politics. Roman leaders often sought the blessing of the gods to legitimize their actions and decisions. A clear example of this is the practice of consulting omens, which were signs taken from birdwatching. The interpretation of these signs helped determine whether or not an event, such as a war or a construction project, should be carried out. This reliance on the gods to guide political decisions shows how deeply spirituality was embedded in Roman governance. Throughout history, the gods were also used as propaganda tools. Emperors, such as Julius Caesar, promoted their image as sons of the gods, claiming that their conquests were, in fact, manifestations of divine will. In doing so, they not only solidified their power, but also created an emotional bond with the people who saw their rulers as representatives of the gods on earth. For many Romans, this connection was vital, providing a sense of order and purpose in an often chaotic world. In short, the influence of the gods on Roman society was pervasive and essential. They shaped politics, inspired festivals, and influenced personal practices. The presence of these deities was intertwined with Roman identity, reflecting both the virtues and the flaws of humanity. Recognizing this complexity is key to understanding the richness of Roman culture and the depth of spirituality that permeated the life of this civilization. Hidden mythology. Roman mythology is rich and complex, full of stories that go beyond the most well-known myths. Among the tales that lurk in the shadows, we find narratives that reveal the darker sides of the deities. These lesser-explored myths not only entertain, but also offer fascinating insights into human nature and morality, showing that even the gods are not exempt from betrayal and revenge. One of the myths that has always intrigued me is that of Jupiter and his many betrayals. Jupiter, the supreme god, is often portrayed as a symbol of power and justice. However, his amorous escapades are well documented. He was not above seducing mortals and other deities, causing conflict and pain. The story of how he seduced the beautiful Europa by transforming himself into a bull is one of the best known, but there are many others that do not receive as much attention. This duality between a god who is to be respected and feared and his human failings is a direct reflection of our own existence. Ultimately, the occult mythology of the Roman gods is not just a collection of ancient stories, but a profound study of human nature. These myths reveal that behind all the glory and power, there are weaknesses and conflicts that make us more like the gods than we realize. By exploring these darker aspects, we can find valuable lessons about love, betrayal, and the complexity of human relationships that continue to be relevant in our lives today. Relationships between gods. The relationships between the Roman gods were not just a simple matter of alliance or rivalry, they were a real tangle of intrigue, jealousy, and conflict. When I begin to explore this dynamic, I realize that Roman mythology reflects in a fascinating way the complexity of human relationships. Just like in our lives, the gods were involved in disputes, betrayals, and even love stories that often ended in tragedy. A notorious example is the rivalry between Jupiter and Neptune. Jupiter, the king of the gods, was often portrayed as a just ruler, but his authoritarian nature created tensions, especially with Neptune, the god of the sea. This struggle was not limited to power. It also reflected the struggle for recognition and respect. Often, disagreements between them led to direct consequences for mortals. In a moment of anger, Jupiter has been known to unleash storms at sea, affecting sailors and bringing disaster. This interaction makes me think about how our own actions can impact those around us, even when we do not intend to cause harm. In short, the relationships between the Roman gods are a fascinating mirror of the human condition, filled with complexity, emotion, and conflict. As we explore these stories, we are reminded that, regardless of our spiritual journey, intrigue and interpersonal dynamics are universal and eternal. The lessons these deities offer us are profound, and by reflecting on them, we can find valuable guidance for our own relationships. 7. Mystery cults. Mystery cults in ancient Rome were fascinating phenomena that captured the attention of many, offering a unique perspective on spirituality and the search for knowledge. These cults, such as those of Isis and Mithras, were not just ordinary religious rituals. They promised something deeper and more transformative to their followers. Throughout history, humanity has always sought answers to existential questions, and these cults emerged as an answer to this search. Mystery cults were characterized by a series of secret rituals known only to those who were initiated. The idea was that wisdom and spiritual enlightenment were granted only to a select group, creating a sense of exclusivity and a strong bond between participants. Those lucky enough to be admitted to these practices often reported experiences of deep spiritual connection and personal revelations. It was an invitation to enter a world where the mysteries of life and death were explored in a more intimate way. The rituals were often elaborate and involved rich symbolism. For example, in the cult of Mithras, there was a ritual that celebrated the death and rebirth of the god, which represented the struggle between the forces of good and evil. Participants believed that by joining in this narrative, they could also experience their own spiritual renewal. It is interesting to consider how these ideas of death and rebirth still resonate in many spiritual traditions today, showing that, deep down, we all seek redemption and understanding of our place in the universe. In short, the mystery cults of ancient Rome reveal much about the human search for meaning, transformation, and community. They teach us that, regardless of time and place, spirituality and the search for deeper knowledge are intrinsic parts of the human experience. By studying these aspects, we can find not only the key to understanding the past, but also valuable insights for our own spiritual journeys. 8. Cultural legacy. The secrets and dark stories of the Roman gods have influenced Western literature, art, and culture, leaving a lasting legacy. The cultural legacy of the Roman gods is a fascinating subject, extending far beyond the temples and statues that have survived the test of time. When we think of ancient Rome, we often picture its grandiose buildings and powerful rulers. However, the influence of Roman mythology permeates our culture in ways we may not have realized. It is interesting how these gods, with their stories filled with intrigue and conflict, have left a profound impact on the literature and art that we continue to enjoy to this day. One of the most intriguing aspects of this legacy is the way in which Roman myths have served as inspiration for writers over the centuries. Many classical authors, such as Virgil and Ovid, not only chronicled the adventures of the gods, but also explored the nuances of their personalities. By depicting the gods as fallible beings with desires and frustrations, they made these deities more accessible and relatable. This more human approach to the divine continues in modern literature, where complex and ambiguous characters are increasingly common. When I read contemporary works, I feel the resonance of these ancient myths, as if they are still speaking to us through the pages. Finally, as I reflect on this legacy, I realize that the Roman gods are not just figures of the past, but continue to speak to our current experiences. Their dark stories and lessons about human nature offer us a rich tapestry of wisdom and reflection. By exploring these narratives, we find not only entertainment, but also an opportunity to better understand ourselves and the society in which we live. In every myth, there is a lesson. In every story, a connection. This is the magic that the gods Romans left us, a cultural legacy that continues to vibrate in our hearts and minds.